My name's David Noble. This is the 9 o'clock meeting. Today's guests, well, everybody these days knows quite a bit about Formula 2. You know, quite a few people these days know about Formula 3 as well. But as we're looking like towards the stars of Formula 1 in the future, where further down the ladder, what drivers do we really need to be keeping an eye on? Now, I've got a decent idea about FRECA, Formula Regional European Championship Alpine. Off Twitter and stuff, I've got a vague idea about F4, but not as much as some. So I have called in the experts, Sam and Alex. Good to have you back on the channel again. Basically, you're pretty much my go-to people for opinions on like young drivers that I hear about who I've not personally seen so much of, whether it be through ADAC, Italian Formula 4, French F4, or the United Arab Emirates, Formula 4, but the younger drivers coming through haven't quite sort of made it into like mainstream news so far. I appreciate my idea of mainstream news and some other people's is not always necessarily similar, but you know, you've got your eyes on the ball.
Yeah, I like to watch quite a few of the junior categories all the way down the ladder.
They're very enjoyable as well. I find them actually to be sometimes more refreshing than to watch like the senior categories where everyone's a proven driver at that level. It's very interesting to see the drivers kind of making their first strides in the sport really, and seeing them grow and develop.
And you can't sneak onto the grid at Formula 1 like you can at ADAC.
Exactly. That's obviously the main reason I follow mainly Formula 4 over here in Germany.
Yeah, it's like, you know, professional F4 driver interviewer going on here. You know?
Well, I get.
You're starting to get into the big time here now.
Wouldn't call it the big time just yet.
Well, you know, never hurts to know people.
That's true. They're very nice guys as well. So.
But the thing is, you chat to them at that level. Some drivers do tend to have a tendency to remember you, especially if you like see them a few times. You know, it's seeing junior Formula stuff at Silverstone or Brands Hatch or wherever else. There's, you know, drivers who have remembered, like my son or what have you, or have remembered chatting to us other times. When we ran into Max Futrell when he was in F3, he remembered meeting me and Ayrton at like Formula Renault a couple of years previous, and obviously you've got like Ferdinand Habsburg, who, you know, we all sort of chat to occasionally on Twitter and what have you. You know, we've run into him a couple of times, so it's always, it's nice being able to say hello to people and them actually vaguely remembering who you are, you know. But what we're here to talk about today, yes. Anyway, as you were saying, Sam.
And then there's me, who's never been to a race weekend.
It's but you know, you know, again with the people, you do communicate and speak to people, and while you've never met them in person, you know, anyone following junior Formula, Sam O'Gara is a name we see quite a lot in comments on people's posts. You know,
I mean, not anymore.
Not necessarily currently on Twitter, admittedly.
To be confirmed.
Right. Anyway, so what we came up with was looking at the young people coming through the formulas, not quite into Formula 3 yet, maybe next year. Basically, we were looking for 10 or so names of people and drivers that people ought to be looking out for. Now, we've compiled our list. We've got our names, you know, people we think people should be watching. So I'll read the names out, give the information I've got in no particular order, and then we'll just sort of talk about them. You know, some of the drivers I know better than others. So we'll see how we do. Right. Driver I'll start with, the on top of my list, who I might be able to talk about more than some of the others, perhaps. Zach O'Sullivan. Now, 2020 British F4 runner-up, and that was so marginal. It was basically a case of the last race got cancelled because of the weather, I think it was, and that was the decider on that one. 2021 BRDC F3 champion by quite a distance, but I've got a couple of hypothetical scenarios for you guys, and I want you to tell me whether he still wins the championship under those conditions. Right?
Everyone.
Yeah.
You ready? First one, because I always like to try and drop this guy's name into a conversation. Imagining for a second Ayrton Simmons had a budget. So he could do pre-season testing and he could go with a team like Carlin. Would Zach O'Sullivan still win that championship?
Marginally, I would say.
It's more difficult to say, but I would still, or like before the season would have begun, I wouldn't, if in that situation, I wouldn't have put my money on Zach O'Sullivan winning it.
Mm.
In hindsight, I would say that I would still say that O'Sullivan wins it, albeit with a much smaller margin.
Mm.
But I think at the time, if he had tested he had taken part in preseason testing and signed with Carlin, I would have said Simmons wins the title.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think fairly early on, I think 3 or 4 rounds ago, it was quite evident O'Sullivan would be winning it.
He was far ahead already
then-
by that point.
Simmons, I think he still is one of the better drivers on the grid, and he's been at it a couple of years, so he kind of knows the car more. I think if he was with a Carlin, he probably would have been a lot closer.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's that thing is I love Chris Dittman Racing as a racing team. The problem is they're a team which basically majors their whole vibe almost is doing the most they can do with what's available to them. Whereas Carlin as a team are a team who are used to winning championships. So it's a different ethos and mindset.
Mm.
So I can't help thinking that had the budget been there for him to be with them, maybe there was more, certainly earlier on in the season when it all went a bit wrong after the first round, that could have maybe been done, which would have definitely made it been a lot closer anyway.
Yeah,
But
I remember hearing Simmons had issues with the car, but didn't have the budget to fix it. So obviously that hampered him for a while.
well, it's a bit of a thing of, I think they ended up having to bite the bullet on that and spend the money anyway. But if it had been a Carlin or someone, it might have happened earlier on rather than after about 3 rounds of like, we're going to have to do it. Anyway, my second, theoretical story. Ollie Behrman or Luke Browning did the full season. Does Zach O'Sullivan still win it?
Depends on what teams they're with.
I would say Luke Browning, no. Ollie Behrman, yes.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, Ollie Behrman very much, when he was there, was very much at the front. But it's like Snetterton, for example, or a couple of other rounds, he just had terrible reliability. So, yeah, I mean, any way you cut it, whether they'd have been there or not, Zach would have still been at the front, which in a rookie season at that level, I think he's the youngest guy to ever win it. The fact that he did end up winning by such a margin, regardless of how you have it with other drivers or whatever else there, he would have still looked impressive, I think. So, I think they're talking, certainly he did have a run out in the Certainly, he did have a run out in F3, of course, for Carlin earlier on this year. So, whether that will, in FIA F3, so whether that will translate to next year and he'll end up doing that, I don't know. But the problem is with Carlin and FIA F3, it's always a bit of a dodgy one because they've not. Next year may be the year they hit form. We live in hope.
Hopefully, but you can't be too optimistic.
I think Carlin would need a major kind of rebuild in F3 or a major restructure for them to be able to compete in Formula 3 again, or to properly compete and not just low positions.
I don't know why because to me, Carlin are the biggest of the British teams. So I don't, and they compete, albeit not particularly high up in IndyCar. They compete in F2 at a very competitive, depending on the driver or whatever else and how they connect with them. They are considered a front running team in that. So, in domestic seasons, they're always the team to beat. So why F3 is such a thing to them, I don't know. We're getting off topic, or I'm getting off topic. Okay, on a completely different scale, then moving on to the next one on my completely random list, Paul Aron. Merck Jr., strong Premier link, so he should normally find himself in a pretty good seat. Why isn't he perhaps doing as much as we think he should be? And why do we think we should still be watching him?
I think.
No,
you go on. You go on.
I think when it came to Formula Regional this year, Prema weren't the front runners, as we all probably naively thought they would be. Did run away with the championship. They, especially earlier on, none of the drivers, whether that's down to the driver of the team, were really winning all too much. But I think he was third overall, best of the Prema drivers. Still a really impressive season. So I think Merck obviously still have faith in him, and that would say something if Merck are sponsoring you.
Yeah, Mercedes though are very, very picky with their drivers. They're sort of the anti-Red Bull, where they only take a select few talents. They should. I would say, if you wanted to put that into a quote, they shoot their darts very precisely, and I think if they've picked up Paul Aron, then he must have like some degree of talent to merit that call up.
What do we think is better, Paul Aron's driving or Ralph Aron's management?
I would say Ralph's management, because I can't remember when he started, but it was 2-3 years ago now, and they were still winning, and he kind of kept that winning culture for a couple of years.
Yeah, they absolutely destroyed Formula Regional in the first 2 seasons. So it's probably Ralph's management.
Because I think he was the guy who got the connection with Merck in the first place, wasn't he?
I believe he had links, and kind of did a bit of talking.
He just seems the very sort of solid operator, I think. So, I mean, my take on it, as I said, is Merck Jr., with the strong links he's got with Prema, he's always going to find himself in a decent place to pick up wins. The shock was basically Prema underperforming. We all literally thought they had that thing sealed up. And I mean, we also said David Vidalas was probably going to be the guy for them, and that just didn't play out at all. So Paul Aron, I suppose, when we're looking at that, almost overperformed by comparison. I don't know. I think for me, the mistake for him would probably be if he stayed in the Formula Regional for another year, because obviously he did Formula Renault and then's done a full season Formula Regional European Championship. I know he was testing F3, but I mean, after 2 seasons at that level, that's got to be the move, doesn't it?
I mean,
normally,
Marathon stayed for third year and he won, and then but Marathons did stay for third year after finishing runner-up, and it's not unprecedented at this level, but I think at this stage he probably should be moving up.
But I reckon that if there aren't any top seats available in Formula 3 for next season, with I think Prema's basically already taken, Trident's already taken, ART is pretty much sealed as well, which I think in that case it probably makes a bit of sense to remain in Formula Regional. 3 years in Formula Regional doesn't look, or of that level, doesn't look great. But then again, we have to take into account that he only did 1 year of F4, so it kind of balances out, I guess. And if he does win the title, that will open up doors for him for 2023 in Formula 3, which will probably be his aim at this stage.
It was primary tested for in like the post-season testing. So what other names have you got as going to Prima then? Because I would have thought if he's stepping up, that would be where he would go. But obviously results do talk a bit.
I think it was Crawford and Behrman, I think, were the other two names testing for them.
Yeah.
I'd say they're probably locked in at this point.
Yeah, and then Arthur Leclerc was never leaving the team, so they're basically confirmed. Like not officially, but they're unofficially confirmed.
We'll see when it all comes out, but yeah, it's definitely interesting. Okie dokie. So I've got Paul down in my own mental list as probably being the second, say, if we're saying sort of 1 to 10, 1 being best, 10 being the lowest, I think I've got Paul down in my mental list as being about 9th out of the names on this list, which says a lot about the quality of the rest of the list. But it's also a case of he's got a lot of scope to grow, and I fully accept we may not have seen the best of him, and he could come into a series and completely knock it out of the park because he's shown he's got pace. I mean, last year he had weekends where it was like nothing, completely dominated. So if he can just and some of that, as I said, was Prima wasn't on form. So, when they were properly working, like the Prima we know, he was delivering, and so there's potential there. I just don't think we've seen the best of him yet.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's a lot more to come from him.
Aaron does have a lot of room to grow. I would also agree.
Right. Next name I have on my list of people is Isaac Kajar. 2020 French F4 third place, 2021 Asian F3. He had 9 races in there and 5 podiums, which when you consider the competition that was in there, F2 drivers and all sorts of things, I thought was pretty impressive. And, the Formula Regional European Championship rookie champion, all which was enough to attract Red Bull's attention. So, again, it's a case of, I think he's been linked sort of stepping up possibly to F3 next year. He's certainly done testing. And if he's part of the Red Bull program, you can see them trying to push him up along a bit. They do like shoving drivers into that category. So, as a rookie, bearing in mind, it can go one of two ways, can't it? Either if he does end up in there, he'll either sort of impress, or the danger is he'll sort of end up a bit Johnny Edgarish, obviously Dennis Algarish in his first season. This is the problem, as I hate big grids, because it's so easy for drivers to just disappear. And there is always the danger he may end up doing that. Or he could absolutely storm it.
I think so. Hadjar's tested with High Tech, who last season were sort of in the mid or bang average, basically. That being said, they did have a relatively inexperienced lineup of Crawford, Iwasa, and Stanek. So, they were never going to fight for the top positions regularly. And next year, it's not looking like they've got any an experienced lineup either. Seeing as how obviously Hadjar hasn't ever done F3, and then his teammates based off testing, which may not indicate too much, but based off of testing will be drivers with limited F3 experience as well.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think that his aim would be to fight for the title, and it wouldn't be Red Bull's aim either, because they've got Edgar, they've got Crawford, who will be battling for the top positions more than likely.
Yeah. Do we think he can be the Dennis Hauger this season? of next year, I should say.
in which he doesn't do well and then proceeds to win the title.
Yeah.
Possible. I think I don't think we've seen him 2 years in a row in any series. I don't think he's done 2 years in a row, so we kind of don't know how he does with.
No, he has done French F4 in 2019 and 20, but then again he was a kind of one of those junior drivers in 2019.
Okay.
I'm getting carried away with the conversation. I actually meant, do we think Crawford could do a Dennis Hauger?
Oh, you mean Crawford? Possibly,
yeah,
yeah.
The guy who wasn't on the list, but we've ended up talking about anyway.
Oh yeah, he could. I think he's done a year of F3 now. I almost said F1. He hasn't.
Well, they want they want an American driver, you know.
It's a bit of a rush. But I think Crawford, he has shown he's had his moments. He nearly finished on the podium in Austria when I was watching, and his car broke down a few laps before the finish. He finished on the podium in Spa in the rain, which was very impressive, and he generally improved over the season. He learned a lot, which is obviously the right progression. And like Hauger had almost like a regression back in 2020 at the end. So if we compare those two seasons, then Crawford's was better than Dennis's or than Hauger's 2020. And with him if he's going to be a Premier next year, which obviously looks likely, he's going to have an amazing chance to win the title.
I'll just say yes. I think he can to keep this from being 4 hours long.
It's not like us to get carried away at all, is it? On previous form, I mean. Right. I mean, going back to Isaac Hadjar, as I said, obviously he's attracted plenty of eyes. Whilst he's not like won championships themselves, you know, with the podiums in, say, Asian F3, with the top rookie in FRECA, he's doing enough to make people look at him. So, as I said, the worry is that he could do the thing of disappearing completely into the midfield in F3. But as we've seen with the likes of, you know, Dennis Hauger, as we've seen from, you know, Jack Doohan, it's by no means a done deal that your career is then going to be over and done with if you've got, you know, enough backing so that, you know, you can get into a top seat or whatever else the following year. So, yeah, he's definitely someone who definitely has possibilities. You know, he at the start of this year, he was like a guy who I didn't really heard of or whatever else. And now it's sort of like he's in the Red Bull Junior program. And, you know, so I think he's one for the future. But as you know, with the Red Bull thing, is, you know, people can grow and go on to do amazing things, or they can disappear altogether. I'm thinking, what's his name?
Igor Fraga.
Yeah, exactly. That he got done so badly. You know, he went into that year with potential, and then had what was no worse a season than a lot of the other Red Bull people, and vanished from sight, never to be seen again.
Well, he's doing esports right now, so he's gone back to his roots.
To his roots, yeah. But, you know, I mean, when you were looking at him, the Toyota Racing Series, you know, winning on a high, completely just there, and some, you know, announcing himself to the world, and then just out without a trace.
Happen to anyone.
So there's always the worry that could happen to, you know, someone like Isaac Hadjar, but I think he's showing enough at the moment so that, you know, he there's hopes of the future, but he's not coming in with like a name a la Doohan or whatever. So we shall see. You know, I mean, Hauger came in having previous championships and stuff, so there's that gap on the CV.
Yeah, exactly. My issue with Hadjar is that he's had 3 seasons of car racing, and he's not even necessarily had a championship to show for it, because there have been drivers who haven't won a single car racing championship before making it to F1 and meriting the step up, who merited the step up. But Hadjar hasn't even been embroiled in a title race, in a title battle in racing, in single seaters so far, which is what I'm what I'm looking at when I think about him being a potential future F1 prospect. So I think the jury is very much out on this one.
Yeah. If I was judging him on his F4 things, just on the French F4 alone, I'd say, he wouldn't have made this list. But his 2021 for me has been pretty damn solid. He's finished ahead of some very, very good people. So that's my thing. If he continues the same progression that he's shown this year, but it's can he? So we'll go from him to the guy who finished behind him in the rookie championship in FRECA, Gabriel Mini.
I think Sam can talk a lot about him because he watched Italian F1 in 2020.
Yeah,
he did kind of run away with that championship. I think Pitsy was his closest rival, and even wasn't particularly close. I think going into this year, I think he was kind of one of the big names. Kind of all the fans of Junior Formula was looking at this guy. He kind of came into Italian F4, he won, and I think people are kind of looking at academies and thinking he'll do really well. I think he's still one of the big names.
Yeah, but the rookies seem to have a really hard time of it in FRECA this year. As the size of the grid, again, very easy to get lost if you have a weekend where you don't get it right. But if you look at sort of like the gaps between Isaac Hadjar won it, who had the occasional podium, the occasional this, that, and the other, and just the people with a year or 2 years experience at that level, it really showed, I felt, compared to some of the newer people.
Yeah, you could really tell. I think there was only 2 rookies in the top 10, and there was a lot of rookies in the field, and talented rookies at that. So you can kind of tell who would experience, who didn't. So I think going into next year, I think it'll certainly be a big improvement.
Well, looking at the article I saw on Twitter earlier today, I can't remember whether it was from Formula Scout or who it was. They were saying that he had got the fastest time in the testing today. So ART, he's got a good. I know it's only testing. It's not even proper pre-season testing, but you always want to put a marker down, and he's doing what he needs to be doing.
Yeah, exactly. Go on, sorry. Yeah.
I was going to say it's never a bad thing to go fastest in testing.
No.
I think he's probably going to be the title favorite going into 2022 in FRECA, because he's got that year of experience under his belt. If he stays with ART, he's got a very good team around him. I think I don't remember who won the team's championship in the end, whether it was our race or ART. I think might have been our race, but ART were very close as well. So you'll have a very strong team to contend with. And he's got the experience and he's got the talent. So
I remember after his F4 campaign, we were saying it was a bit strange how none of the F1 teams had picked him up in a junior program yet. Are we still thinking this at this point?
I think if a team picked him up, it definitely wouldn't look out of place. I think some drivers you can kind of in academies you can go. There's probably better drivers there, but I think if a Ferrari or a Mercedes or a Sauber or something like that picked up Gabriel Mini,
Alpine possibly.
I think everyone kind of look at it and go, "Yeah, it's a good pickup if he can do well next year."
Okay, let's shift along the list a little bit. Explain this guy to me. Nikita Bedrin.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got 5th overall in ADAC F4, 8th in Italian F4. With the Coda, he's the rookie champion in Italian F4.
And in ADAC.
Uh-huh. So basically, it's a case of next year he could be in with a shout, a really strong shout at them championships, or potentially moving up.
Bedrin, from what I've seen of him, or like I've watched a lot of ADAC F4 obviously this year.
Yeah.
From what I've seen of him, he's one of those typical mercurial Formula 4 drivers, one of the very talented ones, like fast but with a tendency to sometimes like crash out of the race.
Uh-huh. So he likes exploring the scenery.
Exactly. Or exploring the front wings of other cars sometimes. But it's a typically very good rookie season in Formula 4. It's been a typically very good season in Formula 4 with like occasional standout performances. I think he got like 3 podiums in 3 races at Imola in Italian F4, which was just fantastic. He won the last race, but that was because Behrman got disqualified.
Yeah.
But still, yeah. And he won a few races in ADAC as well on merit. They were very good wins. I was there for one of them.
I mean, we always sort of say like ADAC and Italian F4 are the best, F4 championships as a rule. So if someone like wins even the rookie class in that, I mean, will we consider it the equivalent to running, say, British or French F4 in terms of like status almost?
I'd say so, because I think a lot of drivers, kind of not struggle, but don't perform at the very top of their series in the first F4 year.
Yeah.
Like Howard was kind of middling with Doohan in British. I think Teo, he won the rookies standing in French F4, but he didn't really trouble too much, like every round. So I think if you're kind of up there, because the Italian field and the ADAC field, even though it was smaller, it still had really talented drivers. If you're winning these standings and you're kind of fighting for podiums and director standings, I think is a very good sign.
Yeah, I mean, realistically in ADAC, he finished 5th. He was never finishing ahead of the drivers who finished ahead of him in the standings. But the fact that he did beat everyone else, which included some good competition, and especially in Italian F4 where he got those podiums and finished 8th in. Well, that was probably the most competitive series in F4 this year.
Yeah.
Speaks volumes about his talent level, even if he does need to iron out a few mistakes.
I mean, we talk about the numbers in ADAC perhaps not being what they used to be or whatever else, but the talent still being at the top of that one. There's nothing wrong with the numbers in Italian F4. I mean, I only watched like the last round of it or something stupid, but it was like well over 30 cars in there.
Yeah.
And it's like, to be at the sharp end of that grid, you've got to be like properly hot property.
Yeah, there's a lot of drivers in that field, so there's a lot of drivers who you expect to do well but kind of don't. So, and they're kind of very good standard 4F4, but they just, and I think like Larson, like he was kind of struggling for a lot of season, even though he just came off an F4 title. Dirksen was in his 3rd year, but he was still kind of not troubling the title fight. So to stand out in, especially Italian this year, you kind of have to be the cream of the crop. And Bedrin, while he did finish a bit lower down, he still did win rookie standings.
Yeah. Right. Speaking of the guy who may be his closest competition next year if he does F4 again, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, if I pronounced that right. Merck Jr. I mean, I've got here who's run by Dino Chiesa in karting, who's previously run Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg, so they know drivers.
And Joshua Dufek.
Yeah, fourth in Italian F4 rookie championship, despite only racing in 3 of the 7 rounds. Now, I remember watching that last round. You wouldn't have known if you didn't have it like told to you that he wasn't a regular. He was properly given them a right fight for it.
Yeah, he was in his limited running. He was, even though I think he didn't start the season, kind of joined very late, so he didn't do. I think he's done quite a bit of testing, but still, nothing really beats the race weekend experience. And for him to kind of come and finish, I think he got top 10 overall in the standings, even though
he got 10th, yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of shows that how impressive it is.
Yeah, I think it was an absolutely outstanding like campaign. He was there for like 9 races, I think. He was there for less than half the season.
Yeah.
First round, even though he was still settling in, he already scored points. And well, I think he even scored in 2 of the 3 races. And then from then on, he quickly built up his like his experience in the car or his feeling within the car, and then he got 3 podiums in the final round, which was astonishing, really.
He nearly.
That was a crazy performance. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, as we were saying about Italian F4, with a grid that big, even like scoring points at all if you're coming in as a rookie, is quite an achievement. To score points consistently and then get 3 podiums in basically 9 races, that's, a point definitely worthy of note. The thing is, he's going in at Prema in it next year, and you're just instantly thinking, well, there's a shoe-in. The thing is, I'm a Ferrari fan, and his teammate is like guy from the Ferrari Driver Academy who's going to be coming in. And I'm just thinking, I feel really sorry for that guy. I mean, he might be very good. I should know more about him, and I don't. I'm sorry about that. But I do, he's got his work cut out for him.
Really, yeah. I don't think we know much about the guy's name is James Wharton, the Ferrari Junior. I don't think we know much about him. He didn't do too much of European karting as well, so it's kind of hard to judge him. But when you look at him coming into F4 with quite a lot of testing, but no single-seater experience against Andrea Kimi Antonelli, who has gained this experience and who has progressed so rapidly.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very tough.
Yeah, I mean, brain's gone to sleep. Never mind. Moving on to the next part. Yes, I definitely think he's going to have his work cut out for him. I mean, there's drivers there where you sort of see them and think, well, they had a decent season, and I sort of have images of that being his year next year, as in like, Andrea Antonelli, Kimi Antonelli is going for the title. His teammate is going for the rookie title, and yeah,
I can certainly see. James Wharton. He won the rookie title and he got that race in Imola, but didn't do much else.
Yeah.
Whereas Kim is not. I don't want to say shoe-in because that's a lot of pressure, but I'll say title favorite even this early on.
Yeah, we'll have to see how much of ADAC he does as well. Because if there's a case of like Bedrin, who we talked about earlier, doing a full season of ADAC, or like concentrating on ADAC, and Antonelli concentrating on Italian F4, then it will be relatively clear from the start who will win those.
Yeah. Right. I can't pronounce this surname to save my life, unfortunately. Tim Tramnitz.
That was correct. That was correct.
Yes, excellent. Pronunciation is not always my strong point. Second in ADAC F4, second in Italian F4. From an outside perspective, not watching the races so much, didn't look that close. But in reality, when I was watching on Twitter, getting race reports about them, there always seemed to be like, he's collided with such and such a driver. Usually Ollie Berman.
Story of the season.
Yeah, so how much of the eventual result was just him being on the wrong side or the right side? Or, I mean, he's made the list because finishing second in both of them is still respectable, very respectable. But is he like an up there driver, or is he good? One day will make a great GT racer.
I think it could go either way. I think there was definitely moments that he got quite a few wins. I think in ADAC he did push Ollie quite close, but then again Ollie got quite unlucky with a lot of races. I think it depends on next year because it's quite a big jump from F4 up to the F3 level. So I think if he can get that right, he definitely has speed. It's just his racecraft. He's gotten into quite a few incidents. Probably spent a bit more money than some of his rivals. So I think I don't know. I think next year will be quite important for him. But he definitely has speed. It's just lacking in something else.
He's a very aggressive driver. I mean, we saw that multiple times in his fights against Ollie in ADAC. But I think in my opinion, he was kind of let down from taking the fight to Behrman in the Italian Championship by us racing not attending 2 rounds, which somewhat
that's not going to help your cause.
Doesn't help a championship fight or a championship assault. And secondly, us racing isn't a regular in Italian F4s like Van Amersfoort is, so they were always on the back foot compared to VAR. So the real battle was in ADAC, where both teams compete are pretty much neck and neck every year, especially recently, where I think the real levels were shown, where Behrman I think he is better than Tramnitz, but Tramnitz is no slouch, and he can take the fight to some of the best drivers at this level.
Cool. So basically, we're expecting FRECA, maybe F3 next year.
I think F the jump. I think FRECA's probably
assessing with our race. Yeah.
Yeah. That would make sense. So, considering the depth and the strength of that field and the amount of people who are probably going to stay for a second year, we're thinking it's probably going to be kind of like F3, where basically it's going to take you 2 years to get to the sharp end of that and win championships in it. And are we thinking this is probably the case? First year is a learning year?
Could be. I think I don't know who he will have as his teammates at our race, so it will depend heavily on that. But and then some drivers adapt quicker than others. Like I didn't think for example Hadja would adapt as quickly as he did. So there might be a surprise there. But we will see. It can be some ranging from like he fights for the title to he finishes somewhere in 10th.
That seems to be the story of most of our list of people here, to be honest with you. As in, they could do this or they could do that.
Yeah.
But the problem is when they're changing series and differing levels of experience at that level or what have you, potentially with differing teams, with so many different factors that could affect the year they have. So some of these lot we could still be talking about next year, as in, the people you have to watch out for, or it could very much go the way it was for like Johnny Edgar and people like that we like, or Pitsy, where it's sort of like, yeah, they kind of fell off a cliff last year. So you just don't kind of know. Looking down my list, there's about 3 names I've still got on my list without going too much into like French F4 or British F4, which I don't think we actually counted anyone off. No disrespect to them. I just don't really know any of them beyond following on Mackenzie on Twitter. Yeah, so all good fun. Luke Brownell. So 3rd in ADAC, so 1 British F4 the other year. I would say a solid talent. When he rocked up for 1 round of like British F3, he was instantly on the pace, challenging for the lead and victories and stuff in that. So, he seems to be able to drop in and out of stuff as well. But not so, I mean, again, I don't know about the Italian F4, how many rounds he did of that, but I think he was about 8th in that eventually. What are we thinking? Is it a bit Zach O'Sullivan interchangeable because the pair of them do seem to be very much on a level?
I think he's kind of been. He did, I think, 2 years of Ginetta, then 2 years of British F4, and then obviously he did British ADAC this year predominantly. I think he's taken it a lot slower than everyone else, which isn't great. Kind of in this sport where teams are looking for younger drivers and big paychecks, and he certainly has talent, but it's kind of he's kind of taken his time to get up there.
Yeah. One thing that is going to help him to people like, for example, O'Sullivan, is that he now has done a series, or well, kind of 2 series, where he's like with ADAC and Italian, where he's raced on like mainland European circuits, which is going to help him in the long term, because obviously the feeder series going up don't race at places like Alton Park or Donington or any of the British tracks bar Silverstone. So that's going to help him for the future.
Yeah.
He's not the wealthiest, so I think he'll probably be. I don't think we'll see him in a top team. From what I know, he's not the well driver. So I think I would hope he'd go up to Formula Regional next year, because he's done enough F4 and had enough success there. So
yeah,
I think one thing I found funny though, when I went to the ADAC F4 paddock, his parents they dressed up so. They dressed up really nicely, and as if they were like big business people. And on his car there were no sponsors, which is just very, very strange. But
sort of a sad state of affairs, really, that actually, because as I said, he was going into that having won like the British F4 Championship. So you would think that would attract something.
Yeah, exactly, and it really didn't. The car was basically blank. It was like a stock F4 car, just bought off the shelves of Tatters.
That's a bit of a worry.
It is.
I mean, we've talked quite a bit about sort of drivers and if they had a budget, but obviously you need money to be able to race competitively at any level, even karting. So, to be racing at F4 like that, I don't even know how you would put a budget together for a decent like FRECA thing, if unless your parents are properly minted. But even then, if you see like almost any other driver going through it, even if their parents have got money, the car has got stickers on it, even if it's just like the family business, because a bare car never looks good. it's like instantly you're like people are put off because of the lack of stuff that's on it. So that's a bit of a worry for him.
It is, and he has to. I think he has to like, or his results almost count more than, or like his wins count almost more than those of other drivers, because they've mostly got the financial backing, and he doesn't. So like when he won at the second Hockenheim round, like he was visibly happy. He was overjoyed and somewhat relieved, and seemed somewhat relieved as well. Because I think he's just, with every win, he kind of prolongs his career, which obviously isn't a nice situation to be in. But
no,
yeah.
I mean we've seen it with plenty of drivers though, where they have ended up dropping out like mid-season from a championship or what have you, or just ended up doing odd rounds here and there because of budget issues. So you never like to see it. So I mean, obviously, hopefully going into next year, he manages to get a proper deal or something behind him. Well, we'll find out, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, when he did make the step up to GB3, I think it was Snedden or Alton Park. I can't remember which one exactly. There was one of the rounds he competed in. He won a race, and then he was also leading, and then had a spin. So like, he has done well in F3, like with F3 machinery so far, to go to Euro or FRECA. I think there's precedent he could do well.
Yeah, Euro Formula Open seems perhaps a more likely direction. I always sort of have this thing that's like almost like the feeder series to IndyCar, because you look how many drivers, my usual rant, have gone like, you know, British F4, British F3, Euro Formula Open, and then jumped over to America because they've run out of money. It's not unheard of.
It could happen, actually. It's an interesting one to think about.
I think Louis Foster is set to race in America next year. So, and obviously British.
Yeah.
So it's another one on the list.
So, yeah, Linus Lundqvist. Yeah, he was a great driver. He was. What am I talking about? He still is. Poor Linus. Yeah. Right. Anyway, we're slowly getting towards the end when I'm stopping rambling on about rubbish. Delano van 't Hoff. I don't know if I've pronounced that right either.
He's Dutch. I'm no Dutch expert, so
I am not Dutch in the slightest.
Right. So we've not included like French or British F4. We are including the Spanish F4 champion, and we've said in the past that that's perhaps not the best series, although the champions tend, you know, like Franco Colapinto and co, tend to be pretty decent. So why am I sticking him on this list, or why have we stuck him on this list? Spanish F4 champion, 130 points from his nearest rival, winning it as a rookie. Now, you can only beat the competition you've got there, but he beat them. Yes, that's pretty convincing. So, I mean, I've not watched the Spanish F4. I know he did a few rounds in FRECA, but again, it's that thing of if you come in mid-season, especially on a grid that big, it's very hard to shine. I heard his name a few times, usually for overtaking and bits, and just like, you know, he wasn't completely invisible on the grid, which is almost an achievement in itself coming into that series under those circumstances. But yeah, I think next year is going to be a tough year for him, because, you know, it looks like he's probably going into FRECA. That's going to be a major step up in class, as you saw with Kaz Havercourt last year, because you managed to do well in the Spanish F4 and you're pretty decent, does not mean you're necessarily going to manage to shine at the next level straight away. So, I mean, he done amazingly well in the level he was at, but it's next year's a tough ask. Next year's going to be the real sort of awakening of how good is this guy. But it's a name that is worth keeping an eye on. Is my take on it anyway.
I mean, he still is an F4 champion, and he still didn't really have much competition. You know, I mean, full disclosure, I watched the first few rounds, and as soon as Alex Dunn kind of dropped out and moved to ADAC, I kind of focused less on Spanish F4, if I'm being honest. But I did watch a couple of races here and there after that, and he usually won.
And to be fair to Spanish F4, the grid has improved a lot over the last few years, and it's actually a very competitive series. I would argue it's even more competitive at this moment in time than perhaps the French and British F4 championships. So it's probably third on the list of F4s right now, and to win that by such a huge margin is really impressive. And yeah, he could struggle in FRECA for sure, but he could also have a. We don't know if he's the next Colapinto or the next Havercourt.
Mm.
I mean, you could have said Lundgaard, who's in IndyCar next year and also won Spanish F4, but you went for Colapinto.
Yeah, but Colapinto is a European Le Mans legend.
Well, he is. The thing with Franco Colapinto is I think he's one of these guys, like so many, who, if he just had a bit of money, could have done more. You know, he's still hanging around the single-seater scene. You know, he clearly wants to try and progress and do a bit more in that. But the fact that, you know, he jumped ship so early to doing sports car racing as well, yeah, you kind of know, like, there's a big part of him that realizes he perhaps isn't going to get as far as he wants to get in single seaters.
It is kind of a good contingency plan to kind of get that experience early on, because a lot of drivers kind of 21, 22 do all right in F3 but kind of won't progress. Like F2, but like they want to do endurance racing. It's kind of tough to make that step in, whereas he's kind of made it very early on, and he actually did really well as winning quite a few races in FRECA. So like, I think he won't struggle to find racing in the future, whether that's F3 next year, whether that's fully in endurance racing.
Yeah. One way or another, he will be a professional racing driver.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, especially if the money isn't as available as it is for some other people, that's about as much as you can ask for a career in motorsport. But yeah. Right, we've covered. I'm looking down my list. We've covered him.
I think there's one more name. I think
there might be one more name. Yes. I wonder who that could be. Let me think of it. I said about this guy at the start of the year when I was talking about what became GB3 was still British F3 at the time, that he could very much have a season not too dissimilar to Lando Norris had in 2016. And wouldn't you know it, he did. You know, it's like was doing British F3 as a side thing, and every time he rocked up in that, he was right on the pace, right at the front, fighting for wins, if not, unfortunately, for mechanical reasons, sometimes not always getting what he deserved out of a weekend. And then going away and doing the main two series he was in and walking off with both titles. You know, I'm talking, of course, about Ollie Behrman, who is now a Ferrari junior. So, you know, having dissed the Ferrari junior earlier, I feel it's only right to mention, yes, there is
there's hope on the horizon.
There is hope on the horizon. Absolutely. So I'm very happy about that, you know. But yeah, ridiculous season this year. First person to win ADAC and Italian F4 in the same seasons. That kind of tells you all you'd really need to know. I mean, you made the point that us racing wasn't at all the Italian events or whatever, but he's still basically, after going through that thing, after a couple of rounds of winning, what, 6, 9? I can't remember how many races it was in a row, but it's like if he hadn't got disqualified from one of them, it could have been even more, So it just a crazy vein of form mid-season. I mean, we've met him. He seems a pretty sound lad, So
yeah, there's nothing.
I'm out of words for him.
I don't think there's anything negative we can say about him, really. I think Sam, like you, David, you've met him. I've met him twice. Sam's regularly talked to him on the Discord server.
Yeah. So
he is an incredibly talented racing driver who's like outdone pretty much almost every driver who's ever competed in Formula 4.
Yeah.
Who is a member of the biggest team in Formula 1. Who
seems to have good financial support behind him, so that shouldn't be an issue, you don't think?
Who will probably be at Prema, well, not now, but the best team in Formula 3.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on in the Behrman world. So yeah, it's his world. We're living in it.
Exactly.
I wasn't really ranking all the drivers we were talking about, but I do know he's probably first, if we're being honest.
It's hard to dispute that. I think very hard to dispute that.
It would take. I think it would take either Antonelli or Bedrin. Probably Antonelli winning, like at least one of the F4 titles to kind of rival him and rival Behrman in that sense of.
Well, I remember you saying like the last person in like Italian F4 or whatever who had done what Antonelli had done, come in and like score that amount of points and finish 10th in the championship had been Behrman the previous season.
It was Behrman the previous year, yeah.
Yeah, those two do very much seem to be the people to keep an eye on. But we've compiled a solid list. We've spent an hour and 10 minutes somehow talking about it because we're so good at monitoring time. It's only an hour and 2 minutes. Sorry, my mistake. I think at that point we have our names. We've discussed them. We should probably leave it there before it gets completely ridiculous. Anyone from French F4 or whatever you guys think need to be added to the list or worth adding to the list, or?
I think one name to mention is Esteban Masson, who won the championship in his debut year and who was tested in Formula Regional. But I can't say much more on that because I don't think French F4 is available on YouTube or on the internet, except for maybe in France, and I don't live in France. So.
I was looking down the Wikipedia thing for that, and it seemed to be very much, like he had pole in this race, he had pole in this race, he had pole in this race. There's like a mid-season drop off a little bit, and then just like more again. And whilst like the other two guys seemed to be pretty close in the points, and the guy who finished third apparently was disqualified from the last round. On pace, he did seem to be the guy. So yeah, I can't dispute that. I know he's testing FRECA at the moment, but obviously whether he'll end up doing that, probably.
Yeah.
Probably a race or ART. So we shall see.
Yeah, and I'd probably also put the British F4 champion Matthew Rees or Matty Rees. Yeah. I would put him into the same bracket of talents that have done exceptionally well in their first season in single seaters and won their respective F4 championships, but we can't say much more about because it is just their first year.
Yeah, the problem is F4 a few years ago, and you had like when Ayrton Simmons finished second, and you had what's his name? I can't remember who won it. He was disappeared completely. Yeah, what happened to him? Anyway, on another subject, when you look at the people, the rookies they had that year, it seemed a really solid, stacked, quality grid. You know, I remember going there and to like the season finale at Brands Hatch and getting like the Arden team, for example, who both, you know, Jack Doohan and Hauger were racing for, and there was like all 5 cars they had, I think it was, or 4 cars they had. You know, all the people in there were at the sharp end of the championship and all came from racing backgrounds, and you know, there seemed to be a real sort of depth of talent in that field. And the few years before it, if you look at the champions and the drivers that had the years before it as well, you know, but this year I'm like, I don't know who any of them are. And yeah, maybe it's because I don't follow like Janetta Juniors enough or whatever, I don't know, but it didn't seem to be sort of as strong or whatever else as I've seen it in the past, which for your domestic championship is always a bit. So I don't know, but yeah, I mean, looking at our list, it's primarily people who have come through from like ADAC or Italian F4. I think basically there's only about 2 names on there that weren't doing them or FRECA. So people at home, if you're not sure about where to look in the future, those are your places. No, thank you very much for joining me while we're having this discussion. It's not got any more out of hand than our usual conversations, so that's good. Yeah. But you know, people at home obviously follow Alex. Whenever Sam appears on like social media again, give him a follow, because you know he very much knows his stuff. And you know, if you haven't watched this channel before, it's usually about this chaotic when I'm chatting to people, so you know it doesn't get any better. But you know, if random running off at tangents is your thing, then obviously give it a follow as well. But that's all we're going to say for now before it gets completely ridiculous. But thank you for watching, and bye bye for now.